Good evening. All 7 states that come under the northern grid faced a blackout in the wee hours of the morning due to a major fault in the line near Agra. Even though power was restored in most states by 9 a.m., large areas bearing the brunt of the power cuts remain affected. Essential services have been largely disrupted and life has been thrown out of gear. According to the Ministry of Power, heavy overdrawal of electricity by some states was the reason for the breakdown, and as a result, the glitch left services like railways, metro trains and airports affected. Union Power Minister Sushil Shinde has said that a 3-member committee has been mandated to investigate the fault. Power supply to critical and strategic locations like the Prime Minister's residence and the All India Institute of Medical Sciences was ensured by switching to power from Bhutan and from power sourced from the Badarpur thermal power plant. The northern grid supplies 36,000 megawatts of electricity to these states, with the load management functions overseen by the state-owned Power Grid Corporation of India Limited. Reports also suggest that Cabinet Secretary A.K. Seth is likely to chair a meeting shortly to review the situation. Tonight on The Big Picture, we discuss the power generation situation in the country. We also talk about distribution, maintenance and the steps required to avoid further breakdowns like this one. We'll also get you an exclusive interview with the Power Minister Sushil Shinde, who will give us the details of the northern grid failure. But before we do that, let me introduce my guests for tonight. Himangshu is the Energy and Infrastructure Editor at the Economic Times. He joins us. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, S.K. Shrivastava, former DG, Indian Met Department, is also with us. And also joining us on the show will be Anil Razdan. He's the former Power Secretary in the Power Ministry. But I'd like to start the show with Himangshu, if I could. Himangshu, this is the biggest power breakdown in the grid since 2001-2002, according to the Power Minister. Now, officials are scrambling for an explanation, and one of the first hypotheses that have come up is that the demand in the western region dipped, while that in the northern region came up, which could have led to cascade tripping. Break down this theory for us, and do you think that is the reason why this happened?
Well, it seems plausible, and in fact, some officials are already saying that. See, what happens is today you have a heavy demand situation in North India where, the monsoon has not been good, farmers need power, and the state electricity boards, they are under enormous pressure from their political masters that you supply electricity. Now, there's one option to buy costly power from the power exchange, from the spot market, but the easier option, the politically easier option without paying up immediately, you just draw more than you're authorized to, what you've agreed to. And that shakes up the whole system. So that seems like what would have happened.
Pretty feasible what they've come up with. This is not the official explanation, of course, but on the condition of anonymity, some officials have come out and said this. Let me go quickly across to Anil Razdan before I come to you, sir. Anil, thank you for joining us on the show, first of all. Now, grid frequency is a critical aspect of power system operations. Global standards, if I'm not wrong, require the grid frequency to be kept close to 50 hertz. But Power Short India, we have a history of fluctuating between 48 hertz to above 52 hertz, which has led to a lot of grid failures also in the 90s as well as the 80s. Now, is the fluctuation, sir, also a reason why the northern grid experiences frequent breakdowns, and why can't we keep the frequency stable?
Well, I think I agree with what Himangshu has just mentioned a little while earlier. 50 hertz, incidentally, is India's standard, and we used to have a lot of excursions, what we call grid excursions, in the past when the eastern region was generating more power, not consuming that much at times, particularly at night, and the northern region, western region, southern were consuming more, so there would be under frequency there, over frequency on the other side. Now, a frequency parameter is something like a human blood pressure parameter. Neither low blood pressure is good nor high blood pressure. Now, how much you deviate from the normal, that standard you set is 50, is really the efficient operation of a disciplined grid. It requires a lot of grid discipline starting from the state level, load dispatch center, the regional load dispatch center, and then the national center. If the states are not disciplined, and as has been explained, they keep overdrawing because the UI charges may be lower than what they would have to pay if they arrange for more power in advance. It is unfortunate. It is, as I say, sometimes I put it akin to a driver speeding recklessly, overspeeding. There may be a penalty for rash driving, but that's not enough, because that reckless driving can lead to a loss of other life and property. And this is precisely what happens when those who are not in the wrong also have to suffer, and everybody goes into a blackout. So in these situations, you withdraw his license. You prohibit him from driving. In this situation, unfortunately, the system is so large that what you do, you cannot withdraw the license of a transmission system or a load dispatch center. We don't have a multitude of these entities there. But yes, there is need to separate the load dispatch function from the transmission function, as we have done one step at the central level.
Right, Mr.
That
Razdan.
out of the Power Grid Corporation, which used to handle both these operations, we have formed a separate company, though not entirely independent.
Mr. Razdan,
Same
we take
needs
your
to be
point.
done at the state level so that a discipline is maintained. Yes.
We'd like to speak a little bit about grid discipline as well, but that's later in the show. I want to get to Mr. Shrivastava first and get him into the discussion. Now, sir, how much has power generation in India been hit by a weak monsoon this year? We know that the monsoon is 23% deficient this year, according to Agriculture Minister, because less rainfall means lowered hydroelectric generation. It also means high temperatures rising and people wanting to cool off, and then obviously using increasing amounts of electricity. How much is a weak monsoon to be blamed?
You are absolutely right. It is well known that after agriculture sector, the power sector is the most sensitive to the monsoon rainfall because of the two reasons. As you have rightly told, the requirement increases because of the poor rain in various sectors, industrial, agriculture, and because of the heat, we require more. Second, the generation reduces because of the lack of water in the reservoirs.
Right.
So both have cascading effect, which makes power sector a key sector which is the most vulnerable and connected to monsoon rainfall.
Right. So that's one of the reasons that why we could have experienced this power failure. There are other reasons as well. We will try and figure out what those were. But before we move on, in the big picture tonight, we'll get you a special interview. My colleague Vishal Dahiya spoke to the Power Minister Sushil Kumar Shinde earlier today, and this is what he had to say. Remember, this is an RSTV exclusive.
Northern Grid failed today morning, leading to a power loss across all states in northern India. People faced a lot of problems. We have with us Union Power Minister, Mr. Sushil Kumar Shinde. Sir, first question is, how much of the power has been restored and how much more time it will take?
At 2:35 a.m., the power grid, the grid went into the disorder, and thereby there were disturbances everywhere in the northern area. But since we had received information, we immediately take cognizance, and I had assured, at 7 o'clock I was asked by the press, while I was boarding the plane from Mumbai to this place, Delhi. So I had said within 2 hours it can be restored. And my officers from the power grid and dispatch load center, they restored particularly the metro, train stations and airport and the essential services. Now more than 80% power is restored now. We are taking it from the other regions. This has happened in the northern area, but we are taking in the eastern and western areas from their quota, we are taking it to supply to these all people. And considering this situation, this had happened 10 years back in January 2001. Now, this should not happen.
So what has been the reason, sir? Because it is now almost 10 years.
And for that, I have appointed a committee under the chairmanship of Central Electricity Authority, Chairman Power Grid, and CO POSCO. They will send report within fortnight.
There is also one speculation we're being told that some of the states which fall under the northern grid have withdrawn electricity more than what was allocated to them. Is that one of the reasons? Because this keeps on happening often.
At the moment, you see, I cannot express on this. It is also possible that they must have been taken, because we had seen the frequency as of now. The frequency of the power for the routine work, you see, has to run between 48.5 rate and 50.5, but it has gone more than 50.12 or 13. I do not know exactly the figures, but I had explained how much it has gone. I don't have figures at the moment. That also might be one of the reasons.
Thank you so much, sir. So this was Union Power Minister, Mr. Sushil Kumar Shinde, saying that power to the essential services were restored within 2 hours. The normalization of northern grid is taking place, and a committee has been set up to find out what went wrong and how to prevent it further. With camera person Shivi Sudarshan, Vishal Dahiya, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
That was Vishal Dahiya speaking to the Power Minister Sushil Kumar Shinde. Of course, he mentioned the over-withdrawal of states, Himangshu. States have been drawing excess power for a while now, according to officials, especially states like Haryana, J&K, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Punjab, all come under the northern grid. So can we assume that this wasn't a sudden phenomena, and the excess of withdrawal of power by states was one of the chief reasons for this breakdown? And also you heard the Power Minister. Do you think that explanation is feasible?
Yeah, that's pretty feasible, and it's also actually pretty easily verifiable, how much power they had agreed to draw and how much did they actually do. I mean, it's good to have a committee to get into the nitty-gritty and, the legal side of things. But this is very verifiable, and this happens at this time, As Mr. Shrivastava also said, monsoon has been bad, and for many farmers, it's very critical. If they don't plant and irrigate the crop now, they might have to miss the entire season.
Right.
At times, there are alternative crops which are suggested, that instead of rice, maybe you can go for another less water-consuming crop. So there's a sense of urgency, and there's enormous political pressure on a state government to quickly release water or to quickly give them electricity by which they can pump out water.
Right.
So these pressures do continue, and I think the monsoon being so bad has really exacerbated things.
Right. Let me get in a quick question to you, Mr. Shrivastava. You mentioned just before the show that the groundwater situation in the country is also pretty bad, and this adds to the monsoon being deficient. Explain to us what are states looking at right now in terms of groundwater?
Let me tell you that Haryana and Punjab, these two states have been using groundwater to their what you call maximum capability. As a result, the groundwater, so-called groundwater, which is recharged every year by the monsoon, which is, the level is 30 meters to 40 meters, has been completely depleted. Now they have gone to deeper, that is, they have gone to 100 meters or lower than that. And there the water is paleo water, which is not charged every year. And that is charged in thousands of years. It takes 1,000 years to charge that water.
Right.
Once that water is getting depleted, then there is a good chance that these areas could turn into arid areas rather than the fertile green bowl which we call and which we know today.
Right, right. Point taken, sir. Mr. Anil Razdan is still with us. Mr. Razdan, you just heard what the Power Minister had to say. Over-withdrawal by states in the northern grid, of course, is a big problem. Let me give you some statistics. The National Regional Load Dispatch Center, or NRLDC, now they issued multiple warnings to state transmission bodies about this. It filed a petition as well before the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, accusing state transmission companies in Punjab, Rajasthan, J&K, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh and other state authorities drawing excessive power. The petition was heard by the Commission on 31st of May 2012, and an order was issued to state transmission companies to rein in power consumption on 10th of July 2012. That hasn't really happened. States continue to overdraw power. What is the solution to this? Shouldn't state governments and the state transmission authorities be reined in with an iron hand, because we are facing the brunt of what they didn't do? They should have stopped overdrawing of power. Don't you agree?
I entirely agree with you. You see, the more we integrate a grid, we need stricter controls so that the misadventures of one or two or more constituents do not affect the 15, 20 other constituents. We've got to bring in stricter laws. I think these penalties that we had enforced of UI are certainly not working, because these states are, rather than contract more power for a bad situation when the units go down or other power is not coming in or demand increases, they are unable to curtail power. We should have very strong penalties, and I think in the load dispatch centers we will have to locate people from the central system who are able to physically sit there and ensure that load is controlled. If this does not even work, then I think when we are allocating power under the power sharing formulae out of the old Gatgill formula from central generating stations, these states which are persistently overdrawing may have to be curtailed from those kinds of benefits which are flowing from a central authority or from the centrally owned stations.
Right,
we need
right.
a very strong discipline, first of all. We need, I think, to build public pressure also on people, so that whenever these excursions are taking place, you please display it frequently over the media, that your action could affect a whole lot of innocent people and in the long run could give you much more harm. Just, we were lucky that the system was restored in a short time. It could take much longer.
Right, right, and we should be
system
prepared for those
protections
contingencies, sir. Stay with
also
us. Stay with us, Mr. Razdan. We'll take a small break, and after the break, I'd like to speak about whether or not there is a larger power crisis looming in front of us. Of course, power generation has been affected. That and more after the break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Himangshu, according to the Power Minister, right now, currently we are getting additional 8,000 megawatts of hydropower, including from Bhutan to meet our demand as well. The northern region is getting power from the eastern and western grids as well. But how long can we keep borrowing from other grids and even other countries? In other words, I'm asking you, how long do you think we will need to borrow? The Power Minister says 60% of the power is restored right now.
Yeah. In fact, since he made that comment, more has been restored. Things are pretty close to
About
normal.
80%
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
So, see, as far as Bhutan is concerned, it's a commercial deal. They generate power, we purchase it. But the lesson from that is, Bhutan is in the Himalayas. It is a small dot on the map, and it generates so much power. And India, which is a huge country, has got Himalayas right from Kashmir up till Arunachal as a belt. We are not able to do that. So it's also time to look at all the issues, afresh. What are the relief and rehabilitation issues? What are the NGOs up to? How serious is the government? Because India has enormous hydroelectricity potential. Likewise, to carry forward the point Mr. Shrivastava made, even reservoirs, there's scope to double, triple it. I think China has 2 or 3 times the capacity. Russia has a few multiples of capacity. So, a lot of water that gets just flown away, frittered away, that can be stored in reservoirs.
Right.
So, in a sense, I think this crisis, the government should seize this as an opportunity to look at issues afresh and enforce some discipline. And come
I'd like to put that question to Mr. Razdan. If you heard what Himangshu said, there's a lot of talk, has been a lot of talk about the potential that India has, especially for hydroelectric power. What has gone wrong, Mr. Razdan? Why haven't we been able to realize that potential that everyone keeps talking about? What are the roadblocks for that?
See, Himangshu is perfectly right. We need large storage projects in the country. The run-of-the-river projects are not able to store electricity. Water and water power are state subjects. Now, when the constitution writers went in for our lists, they didn't probably realize the importance of water. Point is very well taken. We have to bring it at least under the concurrent list. And the storage dams are not only going to provide you electricity in peaking situations like we are running into right now, they're also going to provide water for drinking water schemes and for irrigation. The Bhakra Dam and the Teri Dam are perfect examples of this. And if we do not construct these dams in a short time, and if those valleys get inhabited, we'll have lost the storage potential forever. We also need to give great attention to pumped storage projects, because as we are gradually going on adding more and more coal-based power, we will have probably surplus cheap power available at some times of the day, which we can use to pump up the water from the lower reservoir to a higher reservoir and then draw this entirely out when you need it at peaking time. The NGOs have their own viewpoint. They've been talking of displacements and all kinds of issues. I am one who says that we must have a perfect R&R policy. Those who are displaced must lead better lives than they have been leading so far. But if we are not going to provide this water storage facility today for a country which has a growing population, we will be cheating our future generations and probably creating a lot of cities like Mohenjo-daro in the future.
Right, that's
if we don't act now.
That's a very sobering thought, sir. That is a very sobering thought. We'll come back to you in just a bit. I want the last word on the show to go to you. But before that, I'll come to Himangshu one more time. He mentioned water and water supply as well. The next big worry now, especially in Delhi and the capital region, is the water supply now. Because the water treatment plants in Delhi didn't get power since the shortage. I don't know if right now they've got some power back or not. Even though the Jal Board is getting priority right now, but should we be bracing ourselves for an erratic water supply in the days to come?
I think we should be. Especially, when farmers are in distress, the states which are upstream, they will be inclined to divert that water.
Right.
And this is a regular issue. Each time we have a difficult summer, you have headlines saying that Haryana not releasing water
Power
or somebody else not.
water.
And also when you have such a bad water situation, you see these reservoirs, they have to plan not just for today and tomorrow, they have to plan for the entire Rabi season because you don't get much rainfall. So it is all irrigation. They have to plan for drinking water up till February, March, before which, reservoirs start filling up again. It's, around May and June is when reservoirs start filling up. So it's going to be a long distress period.
It's going to be a tough time for Delhi residents as well. It could be that the water supply will be affected, but we'll have to see and wait and watch whether that happens or not. Last question to you, sir. You heard what Himangshu had to say. Water supply, Jal Board getting affected as well. Do you see a way out of this? Do you see a way out of this at all?
Let me add to your knowledge that luckily this year we had good snowfall. Snow is one water reservoir which is created by the nature and that is released during summers. Fortunately, we have got good reservoir there. So summer we will have good water flow in the rivers. But if July, August, September rainfall is going to be deficient, we are going to have real water crisis, especially drinking water crisis, for which we have to get ready.
Right, absolutely. I would like to ask my last question of the show to Mr. Razdan. Sir, the UP Power Minister, Shipal Yadav, says that during the peak hours, the state itself, and we're only talking about Uttar Pradesh right now, but it should be an example for every state as well, requires about 11,000 megawatts of electricity and the state can only provide 9,000 megawatts of electricity. How can we tackle a situation when the demand is so much more than the supply and the generation? How can we increase our power generation in the country? If you had to give a three-step plan of immediate steps that need to be taken, what would those be?
Well, I would say, first of all, you see, we have a lot of capacity waiting. Between the 10th and the 11th five-year plans, we were able to increase our available capacity, including captive stations, by almost 3 times. We managed to step up from a 21,000 megawatt 5-year cycle to about 66,000. If we need to step up our generation capacities, for this we need fuel. the coal situation has to be sorted out immediately. We have to ensure that more coal is mined. If we cannot amend the Coal Nationalization Act, we must devise a strategy by which Coal India is able to draw mine development and operation leases from world-class operators or best operators or local companies, whatever it is. But more coal supplies have to come in. We have to import coal. Coal-based power is going to be a little more expensive than what it is today. We will hopefully be able to add some nuclear power in the system, but in short, we must add generation capacities, we must arrange the fuel, and in this fuel, we also have to take care that maybe some peaking stations for using gas, natural gas, they come online. This will cost us more, but these peaking stations will be able to shave off those peaks which inadequate hydro addition is unable to do for whatever reason.
Right.
And last of all, the health of the distribution utilities has to be improved immediately. Wherever there is a gap between their cost of supply and the revenue realized, this has to be closed immediately. The past losses, which are, I believe, close to 2 lakh crores, has to be immediately made up in a 2-3 year period.
Right, right, sir.
And the AT&C losses must drastically come down. So these three issues have to be addressed immediately.
Right,
I
sir.
think
Right,
it's
sir.
only then that we can find long-term solutions.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you for those comments. Before we leave, I'd like to ask one parting question to Himangshu. Is there a larger power crisis looming? Very briefly, we don't have much time.
Yes, it is, in two senses. One, every sector, starting from fuel, generation capacity, transmission, distribution, health of utilities, everything is in a mess today, or heading towards a mess.
Right.
And with hydro generation falling short, there are certain states like Andhra Pradesh which depend very heavily on hydroelectricity at this time of the year. So we are heading for a crisis, and my only hope is that very often crises lead to radical solutions and new thinking.
Absolutely. On that note, we end the program today. Of course, like Himangshu said, at times, sometimes when crises do come, radical solutions are, of course, policy prescriptions for these crises could be perhaps on the government's mind right now. That's all the time we have on The Big Picture tonight. Thank you to all my guests, Mr. Anil, Razdan, Himangshu Watts, as well as SK Shrivastava. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. This is all the time we have. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.